Scales of Music podcast.
Like, this guy's gonna be around for a long time.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Scales of Music podcast. It is I, Michael Alvis, joined by the one and only Zach Tinsley. Zach, how you doing?
Trying to get my inner M&M on right now.
Oh, you're in the zone, right?
I mean, that's right, you know.
Are you feeling the goat vibes, or what?
That was the vibe I was going for right now. I mean, earlier, like 5 seconds ago, you were just showing me a picture of the Lamborghini Countach, and it just made me realize that the only way I can afford one is if I channel, my inner Detroit rapper and go double diamond.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Otherwise, all I can ever do is look at a picture of it, and what kind of dream is that?
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Well,
Right.
Welcome back, guys. It's great to be here. We wanted to talk about an event that just happened, very iconic, and I think probably one of the, just with the people that are in it, one of the most iconic inductions into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is the 2022 class. Now, for those of you that don't know, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, yes, it is entitled Rock and Roll, but in its entirety, I see this place as a tribute to music overall. Yes, there's a lot of individuals that are rock and roll artists from Chubby Checker, places like people like that. But music in general is starting to really complement everybody, but we're seeing how music in its entirety is just music in general, even though there's genres. And the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, this year's induction class, definitely showed that off. And we're going to talk about who was inducted today, kind of go over why we think they were, if they should have been inducted earlier. This is what we think on it. So, first we'll start off with...
If they deserve to be in.
That too. We'll see.
Yes.
We'll see.
We're definitely talking about that. Or I am. You can shut up, I guess.
Oh, okay. All right. So, this woman is amazing. When you think 80s rock, she's probably one of the first ones that come to mind. Very edgy, hard-hitting attitude. She was a powerhouse. Accompanied by Neil Giraldo, Pat Benatar was the first on that list. And I think that is rightfully do so from how much of a powerhouse she was in the 80s and how dominant she was. Zach, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Pat Benatar deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And just to kind of go off of what you were saying before, I do think there is sort of this weird thing where people still want to hold over that it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but I don't know when it was that someone who wasn't rock and roll was first inducted. I probably should have done my research there, but I totally agree with you. It's very similar to it. Okay, so we talked about it last time, about how no one cares about the Grammys or the Oscars or that kind of stuff. One thing that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has done really well, I think, is that they've decided to just be, instead of having the Oscars and the Golden Globes and the SAGs and the BAFTAs and the blah, 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 that no one cares about, you've got one thing. There's no need to change the name. I mean, rock and roll... we've talked about how folk and country and rap, sometimes those genres can fall into cultures or regions or certain types of people. Yep. Rock and roll is maybe the one genre outside of maybe classical music that doesn't fit a style or a genre or a ethnic type or whatever or a region or whatever. You can have rap and rock and roll. You can have country undertones in rock and roll. You can splice music way better in it. So I think the idea that we have a Hall of Fame that sort of encompasses all music, rather than changing the name or arguing, well, this is the hip-hop wing of it, I like that. And I think that it really makes sense to me because there's really no reason not to recognize great music. It's not like it's not like the 1400s where all we had is classical, right? We have so many different genres.
Right.
And no one would care if it was I'm sure there is a hip hop Hall of Fame or like BET awards or whatever they might give it out to, but I would say nobody would care about it nearly as much. So, although I'm not going to watch it on TV like I don't watch the rest of it, I actually do care. It's something that I'm like, oh, that's cool. You know, these people found their way in. Very similar to the NFL Hall of Fame, right?
Right.
Like, I don't watch it, but when I see who gets inducted, I'll say, oh, yeah, that person should have been in. And who's that?
Right.
So yeah, it was sort of a long-winded answer as to say, yes, I think Pat Benatar deserves it to be in. But I would go as far as to say I am a little surprised that it has taken this long for her, only because I know that there was a time period in which they did only induct rock and roll. And she seems to kind of be someone who's always been in the limelight of rock and roll. So
Yeah.
I don't really know what the criteria is. Like, is it, obviously it's not like sports where you have to be retired a certain amount of years, because people who are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame are still making albums, so,
Right.
or if they're not, they have the ability to, if they're alive, whatever. So I am a little shocked that it has taken this long for her. And maybe if you want to give some background as to who this guy is, why is she not just going in alone? That I didn't really understand, but I think it's a good induction. I'm not like a massive Benatar fan, but I do think she deserves to be in. She's got enough hits, enough, you know.
Yeah.
But it's a little odd to me that it's 2022, right? I mean, this is somebody
Right.
who's been around forever. So, anyways,
Yeah. Neil is the notorious and iconic guitarist that you hear in all of her songs.
Oh, and she's married to him. That makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember they had like some American Idol thing with both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I remember that.
I mean,
Okay,
his solo on Heartbreaker is just ridiculous. I mean,
Right.
It's gnarly. So I 100% agree that she is well deserving, and Neil as well. I mean, with what he's accompanied on over the years, especially on her songs alone, hard telling what he's done with anybody else.
Right.
But definitely will do. But yeah, I agree. She probably should have been inducted in like the early 2000s. I think 2022 is a little late. Because I don't know. I mean, I think she did so much in the 80s that it was. She left her footprint, and she left a deep one, and she left it good. And her level of, I guess you would say, iconicism, I don't know what I'm trying to say, was just
Right.
so there that everybody knew who Pat Benatar was. Heartbreaker comes on. I mean, everybody at some point is going to jam to it. So I thought, like you said, she
Right.
definitely should have been inducted earlier.
Yeah, and I mean, she's not a one-hit wonder.
Nope.
Right. Has a lot of stuff. Almost wonder if it's one of those situations where, because they're married, she was like, hey, he's been on all of my albums. I mean, you got to put this guy in too,
I only go in if he goes in.
Yeah. But I mean, that makes sense, despite the fact that it's always her credit and not really his.
Right.
But I mean, they've admittedly made all this music together. It would sort of be like if a band got in a Hall of Fame and had like another lead singer for the first like 5 or 6 albums that maybe wasn't as popular,
Journey.
but they were like, hey, we got to put this person in as well, right? So
Right.
I mean, obviously that wouldn't happen in all instances, but I would say that to me that sort of, it's kind of like I mean, is Bernie Taupin is in with Elton John. I mean, he's done like literally they've done everything together, right? So
Right.
if they didn't go in together, he's likely in, I would say. If he's not, should be.
Right.
So yeah, I think that was a good one.
For sure.
Again, I'm not like a massive fan of hers, but you're right. When her songs come on, they're super distinct. They're recognizable, and at least Hit Me With Your Best Shot or something like that, you're going to bop to it a little. So
Yeah. Especially if you're on the highway, Heartbreaker comes on, and it's like, I may just
Yeah.
get in the gas a little bit.
Well, how about this? I mean, she came out with her first album in 1979. She didn't even get nominated for the Hall of Fame until 2020. Didn't get in.
That's
and then
what
wasn't
I'm saying.
nominated at all in 2021 and then got in this year. So isn't that
That's-
weird?
I see. Look, I just don't understand it. I don't understand why it took this long. It took 2020 for them to even consider her for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I mean, especially since they're putting like 14 or 15 people in every year.
Yes.
To not even be nominated until 2020. 41 years after Heartbreaker. It seemed, I mean, that's what I'm saying, like late. I'm shocked.
41 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So late.
Oh,
I would say
man.
late. Late on her. All the rest of them, I'm not necessarily sure. Oh, well, there might be one more on here that I'm like, yeah,
there's
you're late.
two on there that I'm like, yeah. But oh my gosh, yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, 41 years. Woo, stressing me out because I would have been like, y'all are nuts.
Right.
This should have been done 12 years ago.
Maybe I should look up the criteria for this, but it does seem a little strange to me that somebody who has had that much success for that long would not even be nominated for 4 days. You know.
Right.
So, anyways, yeah. Agreed on Benatar.
Yeah.
Has a lot of unique factors as well. Again, people who want to style their sound after that sort of Stevie Nicks, Pat Benatar, sort of like raspy hard rock woman voice, right? I mean, there's sort of that slew, you know, like you know, there was that time period you had a bunch of men who sort of sounded similar, like Axl Rose and the guy from Poison and some of those others that kind of all had the same sound.
Dee Snider.
Yeah, Dee Snider. Yep, exactly. There was sort of that group of women as well that sort of had that, like, you know, grungy but still like pitchy thing that they would do, and Pat Benatar was one of those. So again, I mean, good songs, great career. Too late, for sure.
Yeah, too late for sure. All right, next down the list, and we're not hitting this in any specific order. We're just going right down the list of the inductees of what they have given all of us for you to look up as well.
Right.
This group probably were, if you were to look up, if pop and 80s were in the same spot within a dictionary, this group would probably be the picture of the definition. Known for their pop melodies and just their airy synths and waves. The one and only Duran Duran was next on this list in terms of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees. These guys, I think, were definitely deserving of it. A lot of people probably wouldn't agree with me, but taking into consideration songs like Reflex, one of my personal favorites, Ordinary World, and Hungry Like a Wolf, and not to mention a lot of movies from the 90s had all these songs. A lot of Adam Sandler movies, a lot of Drew Barrymore movies had all these songs. So it just kind of stuck with me. So I have to say I agree. I agree with this, with them being on this list. I'm not sure if it's too early or too late. I can't really say that just because I don't think they were as impactful. But I definitely do agree that they have a rightful spot in the Hall of Fame.
Well, this was a total coincidence today, but I did wear my James Bond shirt, so I'm sporting A View to a Kill right now. So a throwback to Duran Duran getting that spot in '89. Yeah, so okay, yeah, I would agree that they probably should be in, and I would also say probably not too late because Duran Duran sort of fell off the scene at a weirdly similar thing like Aerosmith, where they were super huge, and then they were kind of whatever, and then they just stormed back for about another couple years and another decade.
Yeah.
Similar to how Aerosmith in the 70s was massive, sort of teetered off in the 80s, and then just blitzed the 90s about as well as any rock band could have. I don't love Duran Duran. I don't necessarily. I was listening back through their songs, like, all right, do I care about any song other than "Hungry Like a Wolf"? And I'm not going to sit here and say they're a one-hit wonder because obviously they do have more hits. I do think that their "A View to a Kill" is one of the better James Bond openers. But I don't love them. If it were solely up to me, I probably would not put them in. But from a music historical standpoint, I would not agree with you about if you're thinking 80s pop, you would put Duran Duran at the forefront, like 80s pop band, because there's a band that I think does what they do 4 times better that I still also don't love, which is U2. I feel like they're a very similar band, right? They do kind of that arena style synth, and so
Duran Duran did with keys what U2 did with guitar.
yeah, exactly. So again, I'm going to agree. I think they should be in. They've got enough hits. They've got enough longevity. They've got enough fans and following of people that care about them. But I think that you got to want to like them. They're sort of like REM in that sense, where you sort of you got to want to like them, right?
That's a really good comparison. Wow.
Yeah. But I don't think too late. I think just right because they've had a long career, but I don't think they're great. And I don't think they're like Pat Benatar was too late because she's been iconic for forever, right?
Right.
Duran Duran is only iconic if you care, in my opinion. You honestly probably could go your entire life without hearing one of their songs. It would be very difficult to go your entire life without hearing at least Heartbreaker. You see what I'm saying? So should be in, not too late. I don't love them. If they never got in, I wouldn't care. But I'm not going to sit here and cry.
Right. I agree. All righty. Next up, one of my personal all-time favorites. And when I found out that he was considered for this, I knew it was going to be controversial, but I knew it was going to be probably one of the most iconic moments in his genre's history. But I want to start this off with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's introduction sentence of him. He shoves controversial topics from domestic violence to white privilege down America's throat.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know who I'm talking about. Mr. 8 Mile, Detroit, Marshall Mathers, Eminem. Why is a rapper in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you ask?
Because Run DMC is.
You beat me to that. I was going to say Run DMC is in there for one. But and I've said this before, he fabricated a realm of rap that nobody's seen before, but he also completely changed the game in the meantime. And he still continues to do it. He is one of the most, if not he's one of the most influential artists of rap, but if not music in general, period. And he he set records. He told everybody to shove it because he proved everybody wrong in everything that he did. And I think him having that chip on his shoulder is what really kind of drove him to be, the Eminem that we see today. I mean, he's got multiple Billboard hits. Stan, one of my favorite songs of all time. Mockingbird. Heck, the whole Curtain Call album was amazing. He came back in the late 2000s with Revival. Yeah, people didn't really view that album too much. I thought it was good. But then he comes out with Kamikaze, Music to Be Murdered By, the whole MGK disc, all of that. And it really solidified that, he was main of the 2000s and late 2000s, early 2010s, but he's still here in this rap. He's still here in the music game. He's not going anywhere. He put his foot down. He has, like I said, he's got 15 Grammys underneath his belt, and he's one of the single best-selling artists of the 2000s. He has every right to be on this list if we're talking music in general, period. from a producer standpoint, lyrically a standpoint. He has a lot to do with his productions musically as well. He 100% deserves to be on this list, and I am freaking ecstatic that Marshall made it. He went from 8 Mile Navarra to the freaking Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I mean, he's a multi-diamond selling artist. He's sort of like the Tom Brady of rap in the sense that you could split up both of his careers. He's got 2 Hall of Fame careers. I mean, he could have stopped making music before 2009 and he would be in, and he could have started making it in 2009 and he would be in. So maybe not as effectively in if
Right.
it's started with Relapse. But I think
Oh,
with
no.
Marshall Mathers 2 and Kamikaze, and even if it wasn't necessarily the albums itself, but Godzilla, Rap God, those specific songs that got really huge, but then also Recovery, which is a massive album that came out in 2010. So,
yeah.
so I mean, if you just took Recovery and Marshall Mathers 2, and then like the single note hits that he has on the other albums, even if you don't consider those great, he does have 2 Hall of Fame careers, right? Is the first half obviously the bigger and better.
Slim Shady.
But yeah, so yeah, I mean, I think he definitely deserves. I mean, again, once you open up the gate of it's not just rock and roll, it's all music, I think he has to be in. And one of those like, well, again, it took Pat Benatar. Pat Benatar's had a 40-some year career. Duran Duran, almost the same. But I mean, again, this is somebody who might be the greatest in his craft. And if he's not the greatest in his craft, he's one of 3. And the other
Yep.
is, Snoop Dogg probably mainstreamed hip hop in sales and homes, but Eminem put it in every house, right? So, I mean, whether or not you want to deal with the fact as to why that is kind of is irrelevant and doesn't matter to what we're trying to say here, but he did, and that's all that matters. And I don't know that if you were to ask me what's the one artist that if you had to say, okay, hey, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame can only have one a year, here are the 14, he would be the one. He's the best of all of them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. He's Marshall. Congratulations. Happy for you. And if you're in a studio working on some more stuff, man, let us hear it. Because I am 100% here for it. Alrighty. Next up. This duo, people will probably know the lead singer of this duo compared to the duo itself, but probably people don't even know who the singer is. Talking about 80s pop rock, one band that stuck out was a duo called Eurythmics. This group, led by the elegant and lively Annie Lennox, really took a hold of rock and just made. I don't know. It's really hard because Sweet Dreams was just this iconic. It became iconic not too shortly after it dropped, but then so did Walking on Broken Glass, with when Annie went on her solo rack. I think in terms of why they stuck out and why they became so iconic is because those guys like Duran Duran, Steve Winwood, and a lot of others, they were on the transitioning side of 80s music into the futuristic kind of what they thought music was going to be for the 2000s. Heavy synths, heavy guitar riffs, this kind of white, kind of sci-fi, kind of dramatic music, and they basically kicked ass at it. So I have to say, I mean, do they have all of the hits like others in this group do? I don't think so. Um, but by looking here, looking back, they've got quite a few. Um, so I can't necessarily say that, but I think probably now would be the time for them to get inducted. I don't see them like heavily iconic to where they need to immediately be inducted, but I mean, if I'm talking about that, I could say it took forever for LL Cool J to get inducted, but they did him. But yeah, Annie Lennox, Eurythmics, and that amazing instrumentalist Dave Stewart. I think I think they're a shoe in.
Well, I don't I don't want to argue on the fact that like some of their musicianship has maybe gone beyond me. But I mean, despite the great introduction that you gave them, and I, applaud you for this. I'm not trying to jump in,
It was all right.
yeah, yeah, we're doing as well as we can. I, I gotta say, man, I'm a no on this one. When you're okay, so they're a one-hit wonder. I mean, they might have had other hits, but they're a one-hit wonder. They have one song that anyone knows. That's in any type of music syndication. And I would also say, do you deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when your version of the song's like not even the best version of that song, right? So, I mean, I would say Marilyn Manson's version of the song is better than theirs. Personally, I personally think that. So, I don't know, man. I don't think so. And I even listened to some of their stuff. Like, again, I tried to do my homework today on some of the ones. I was like, really? They got in? I was listening to some of their music, and Duran Duran, again, to their credit, I came out like, yes, I don't like them, but they deserve to be in. They have the historical presence. They have the songs. They have the sales. I don't think this band does. I mean, I'm not saying that their lead singer's not iconic in any way. Obviously, Led was very popular as a celebrity figure, but nobody remembers who that person is anymore. That they don't have any presence today at all. And again, I just don't see how you can put a one-hit wonder that doesn't have the sales, doesn't have the longevity presence, and in my opinion, their one hit is done better by a different person. So, and now that is a different take. Most people would probably not agree with me on that, which I'm fine with, but
That's the beauty of it.
I just, nah, man. I don't think that they should be in just because they have this great hit that's on the radio all the time. And again, that song is great. There's no denying that song is absolutely incredible. And if I had to make a list of top 10 one-hit wonders ever, that's going to be in it almost every time. But, I mean, I don't know. I'm out on them. I don't think it's too late, too long. I don't think they deserve to be in. There's just not enough. Not enough for me. Again, if that singer was like kind of still a presence today and was doing stuff on TV and like, oh, I had this hit, but I'm more in the studio, similar to how they nominated studio people, but that's not the case. They had a 6-year run. I mean, so I don't know. Anyways, that's just me.
No, I mean, I can see, I see your view on it there. I mean, Annie had in my opinion, she had a bigger solo career than what Eurythmics did as
right
a duo.
And that might be true. I just don't know about it either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
walking on broken glass was iconic. Still,
right.
It's probably when it comes on. It's not only was it mixed amazingly, but it's just everything within that song and her lyrics complements everything else.
Right.
And then the incomparable, if you want to stay young and beautiful, if you want to be loved, that song too. So she's got a few out there, but yeah, I agree. I don't necessarily think they were as big in terms of
put
what
her
I would think
in.
to
I
get
don't know.
in.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if she's in or not, but
well,
if
no,
she is,
I think
that's
she
what
may
I'm
be.
saying.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe it doesn't matter. And
Right.
again, I mean, hey, it's not my vote, but for sake of argument here, I'm just looking
Right.
at this like, if there's one person on this list that I was kind of like, it was them. And listen, and I take a very similar approach to Hall of Fames, kind of the way that Colin Cowherd has in terms of sports. You know, we talk
Right.
about like I'm not necessarily sure like a guy like Phillip Rivers should be in the Hall of Fame. Like he had a fantastic stats career, right? He won a couple playoff games, but at what point was he ever one of the best in his craft at any point in his career? I mean, he might have been really good a couple years, but it was sort of that same argument with Matt Stafford, but he just went and won a Super Bowl. So I don't want to make this about sports, but that's sort of how I feel about your Rhythmics, right? They have one really good hit, and that hit is crazy good. I would say that hit is bigger than anything Duran Duran ever did, but there is no longevity. There is nothing. They were never one of the biggest in their you see what I'm saying? They didn't have
Yeah.
the sales. They were only around as a band for a very short amount of time in terms of popularity. So that's what I'm saying is in comparison to sports, right? You have these people who put up massive numbers for a short amount of time or maybe even for a long amount of time but do nothing else.
Right.
Did they deserve to be in the group of I mean the first 3 that we talked about, although maybe a little controversial, they all contributed over a period of time, right? So it just does not do that for me. So, yeah.
100%.
No.
I completely understand that view. 100%.
Right.
Next up, this lovely lady.
Needs no introduction, by the way. You won't hear a diatribe about not being in for me here.
She gracefully and humbly initially turned down her induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because she said she hasn't made a rock and roll album. And this is where a lot of people that like rock and roll jumped on a wagon and said she's right 100%. But she turned it down. But I guess that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame committee insisted on putting Miss Dolly Parton into the hall, where she most rightfully
Well, do you
deserves to
think
be.
that they weren't really going to do that? I think she was saying that. I mean, I'm not to say she's not humble, but you know, there was optics there, right? So she's always been sort of for the people and
Yep.
is really good personal PR she's had for her entire career. And it is out of genuine nature. I'm not trying to say that like she's faking it or anything. But I mean, even though she did that, was there any do you think they were like, nah, we're not going to do that? You know?
I
Was
don't
there
know.
ever a chance she wasn't going to get in just because she said like I don't deserve it? To me, that just was a humbleness about her that she's always had, right?
Yeah, exactly. She's like, when she said, whenever I fit, maybe I should do a rock and roll album. I've always wanted to. When maybe I've done that and it succeeds, then she'll be 100% for it. But I agree with her, but I also agree with the Hall doing this just because I think she's. I mean, you think country? I mean, women in country. Who do you think?
Yeah,
Patsy Cline,
her.
Dolly Parton.
She's the best. Yeah, I mean she's the best.
I mean,
yeah,
she had so much to her, especially at the beginning of her career, and she still does to this day. I mean,
but here's the thing that I think Dolly Parton doesn't understand, or I mean, maybe doesn't understand about herself, right? So
you hear that?
she's like, well, I haven't made a rock album or whatever, but that doesn't matter because people in rock have redone your songs well. The songs that you have written have been inserted in rock, and you know, I Will Always Love You is one of the greatest Whitney Houston songs of all time. Like,
White Stripes did Jolene.
right, exactly, and some other people have done that song as well in a rock form. So,
Yeah.
regardless of the fact that she's not done any rock and roll, if you're going on the only rock and roll people should be in, if that's the case, she still should be in because her songwriting has influenced and bled into rock across the board. So, I mean,
Yeah.
regardless of the way that even if you are taking her view of it, I don't think her view is even correct. I think that she deserves to be in even as a full country artist because of her songwriting. and how that's bled
Oh,
into
yeah.
all genres. So yeah,
Oh, yeah.
and I'll take it back. Actually, I think if there was a list of, I said Eminem would be in. I think maybe I would put her in before him for the longevity factor. She probably should have been in before now. So if they were letting country music artists in before, the fact that she's only in now is kind of insane to me. So
Right.
yes. Right.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a little. I mean, of course, it's kind of hard to judge a time frame on these things, but I mean, it just really depends on the career. But with her career, long overdue, long overdue. But I really just I loved her approach on it. Whenever she got the word, it showed her who exactly Miss Dolly is, who she always has been. That very genuine, classy lady that she really just wants to better everything and everyone she's around. I mean, when you look at her interviews, that's really all she's about, is just being happy and lively. And she, like, I've never seen someone express so much gratitude for their career other than Dolly Parton, and not let it get to their head. So I
Well, I
love
think-
her for that.
I've always wondered about this. You think about musicians and artists that sort of transcend all genres, and not only that, but decades, right? So think about how many artists out there do both 20-year-olds and 80-year-olds respect as a person.
She's one of them.
She is I think. Like, maybe Willie Nelson, maybe him as well,
Yeah.
but they're the only two. And some people don't like Willie because he's a big pothead, and she's the one out here like funding, the Moderna vaccine. So
It's a double-edged sword.
there isn't anyone like that. I don't think there's anyone who a Gen Zer can turn on and listen to like with their great grandmother, and they're both enjoying themselves. There's just
Right.
that doesn't exist. And it does with Dolly Parton, because she is what she is that. And so for a lot of reasons, she just transcends music in so many ways. And that's what I'm saying.
She
From a
does.
likability, I think she's number one, right? Of all artists, like likability, cross board, is she number one?
I mean, I think from, I mean, honestly, I mean, I shouldn't even try to find the words, because, I mean, you're right. I mean, you look at artists who you see them, it's like it's an ordinary, regular day. They're a regular human being. She has never let it get to her head.
Yeah.
She's always been that genuine person. And like you said, I mean, honestly, if I knew her, I'd probably go to her for about every bit of advice I ever thought would need, just because she's got the wisdom, especially within the industry, man. I mean, she's awesome.
Yep.
Rightfully do.
Yeah, agreed.
Rightfully do. All right. I'm going to shut up on Dolly Parton on here.
Yeah.
Next up, my guy. I think he was Steve Harvey's long-distance cousin at one point, just because they have similar...
with the stash. That's where you're going with it.
because they have similar mustaches.
Steve, that must be your cousin, because that mustache is fire.
Both y'all got mustache and big lips, so y'all gotta be related somehow, some way.
Not anymore, though. Or
Not
does
anymore.
I
They
don't
went
know.
down a little bit. Steve's is still up there.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's gray now, though.
Oh, right. All right. So we are talking about one of the members of one of the most iconic R&B groups of all time, the Commodores, Mr. Lionel Richie. This guy is coined for multiple songs in terms of writing. He's wrote multiple songs for not only the Commodores, but he's done a lot for Diana Ross. I mean, he's done stuff for Celine Dion, We Are the World. He's worked with Paul McCartney, Madonna, Whitney Houston, you name it. 6 Grammy nominations for Song of the Year, which is a very iconic category, even if you like award shows or not. But he has been influential in not only in game of music but R&B in general. From the writing that he's done for Neo as well, I think, and I'm not sure if the Commodores are in the hall, but I think at this time in his career, because he's not doing much live anymore, he's only a judge on American Idol. 100% shoo-in the win. Congrats, Lionel.
Yeah, I mean, no arguments again. I mean, I've never been a massive Lionel Richie fan. I mean, I think he's good, but I'm not like jumping for his music or anything personally. But everything you said is correct. I mean, he was in the Commodores, was a big part of that. They themselves, if they're not in, should probably be in themselves. And then had a huge career. And then again, sort of what I was talking about before, even within the career that he's had, he's then now transcended music to be a reality show figure, somebody who is known in the present day. So absolutely 100%. And even though the only album my dad had was Dancing on the Ceiling. So, but yeah,
hey, man.
Lionel's good. He's good. He deserves it. He's one of the best. He's one of the best in his genre, and that is for sure. And like you said, outside of just him making his own music, he's been a big time producer, but is still relevant today. And now obviously that can't be the case for some of these people who have passed on or whatever, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, 100%. I personally think he's probably one of the greatest songwriters of all time, too.
For sure, yeah.
I mean, it's well due for him to be in the Hall
I mean,
of Fame.
I think you could argue he could be in the Hall of Fame if he never had any personal hits. I mean, there's just so much that he's done for music that could put him on. We're going to get into it a little bit later at some of the bottom of the list, but you could have put him down with the people at the bottom of the list. You know what I mean?
I think All Night Long's a jam.
No. Like I'm saying, even if he didn't have those songs, right? Like even if he was just in the Commodores and then became like a producer and just like produced music and worked with people and then had the American Idol thing, like all Night Long, Hello, that all great songs, right? What I'm saying is that he deserves to be in, even if he didn't have a great singing career, So I think he's similar to I was saying about Eminem at two Hall of Fame careers. I think Lionel Richie for a different reason. I think he's got a Hall of Fame career as a singer and then one as just like a music philanthropist.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
I agree. He's I mean, I think it really kind of describes and shows the kind of person and artist that you are, because a lot of people, they'll use music just for the fame of it. You see, but then you've also got artists like Dolly and Lionel. You hear that too?
Yeah, I know what it is.
Is it your AC?
No. But if we want to take a break, I can turn it off. Let me go turn it off.
Yeah. He's going to turn it off. But yeah, I agree on Lionel being in here 100%, especially when it comes to the two Hall of Fame careers. And that's kind of really, I mean, you don't see that with a lot of artists. You don't see that with a lot of groups. But you do see it with some of the OGs. We'll be right back. Are you looking to start your own podcast? If so, join me and countless others in sharing your stories and knowledge with Buzzsprout. Getting started with your own podcast isn't that difficult if you have the right team at your back. You'll be getting a great-looking podcast, easy to embed audio players to your website, and you can easily distribute your podcast across multiple platforms, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, TuneIn, and more. Follow my link in the show notes below to start for free. Yeah, I said for free. Following my link lets Buzzsprout know that you heard of them through the Scales of Music podcast. Check it out below to get started today. Have fun with it. To all me. Alrighty, and welcome back to the Scales of Music podcast. We are here talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductions. Next up on our list, one and only Miss Carly Simon. Zach, what's your view on Carly being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Well, I mean, seems pretty straightforward to me. I mean, Carly Simon has, I mean, some of the best singer-songwriter albums by a woman that there is. She also, I'm also sporting Carly Simon on The Spy Who Loved Me, so wrote that. James Bond just ekes his way into everything, right? But I mean, I believe, or was it Carole King? Was it Carly Simon or Carole King that we said was the female artist of the 70s? I think it was Carole King, actually, because she was Tapestry, right? So yeah,
Yep.
so
Carole
but Carly Simon was another one that we brought up, and I just think, again, in terms of people who are known for their lyricism and their songwriting ability, and maybe they don't have the extreme amount of hits that people recognize.
Right.
For a different reason, like I said, I mean, Carly Simon, again, isn't necessarily breaking the mold in 2022, but for the longevity of music and the songwriting and the fact that she really broke into that Paul Simon and Bob Dylan ranks as a female within the genre, and that genre, it spearheads everything else that is what today's folk women, specifically like Susan Tedeschi, who's a big singer-songwriter, guitar player,
Right.
all the way to your pop folk with Taylor Swift and whoever. It doesn't matter. Like, Carly Simon is one of the 5. If you're making a list of what woman singer-songwriters paved the way to what is today, Carly Simon is in that group of people. And I'll go where we've talked about too late. I think this is too late. I mean, I don't
Agreed.
understand how someone who is writing music as dominating as she was, with Anticipation and having, You're So Vain on her second album, No Secrets, which was in 1971, and teaming up with James Taylor and writing a song for a James Bond movie way back in the 70s. I mean, this is somebody who had a career in the 60s that everybody knows about. I'm
Right.
shocked she's even on this ballot. So way too late on this. No arguments for me should be in. Should have been in. When did they start doing the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? The late 80s? Like, should have been in then. So,
Right. She should have been
there's very few people on this list that I think, like, how in the world did they even miss that person? And the fact that Carly Simon is just now in is even weirder than Pat Benatar to me on a longevity scale. So,
I mean, I don't know too much of like her background, but from the songs I do know of her and like her influence on people in general, I mean, from writers and musicians alike, I mean, Carly Simon's one of the names that always gets brought up. And I agree. I think it's perfect. I think it's late. She's overdue. Should have been in a little bit earlier than this, but definitely glad to have her in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I mean, in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, here are the 3 people that they put down as her legacies: Taylor Swift, Alanis Morissette, and Tori Amos. And you're telling me this person just got in?
I mean, if you look at that list, starting with Alanis, I mean that she should have been in the 90s.
That's what I'm saying. That's what
Alanis
Alanis
is iconic in her own right. Then you had Tori Amos,
and Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a Swiftie, but I will say, Taylor, that girl can write, and I can see. I see Carole King, and I also see Carly Simon and Taylor.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's just it's odd to me. It's odd to me that she's even here. So
Right.
I mean,
She should have been already in.
I think so. But I'm a sucker for that kind of style of music anyway. So
Right. All right. Next on the list is somebody who, to a lot of people, had a very smooth, calming voice. I've heard a lot of people kind of his sweet, kind of soft, velvety voice, and when it came to his delivery, unfortunately, I don't know too much about this guy. I have to do some more research. I feel kind of bad, but next on this list of inductees is Harry Belafonte. One of the probably, I would say, maybe top 15 blues, rock, and jazz artists of the golden era, I would say.
And that like Sam Cooke era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm sad to say that the thing I know Harry Belafonte the most from is a clip my wife showed me of him singing "There's a Hole in the Bucket," which is pretty funny, and he does a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Harry Belafonte. I guess I'll go and say this: like, I like him. My wife would die to find out that it's taken this long for him to be in a Hall of Fame because that's her kind of music and she just loves him. But
Really?
Oh yeah, I mean Dean Martin is her favorite artist, dude. She'd listen to
Wow.
Dean all day long. That kind of crooner thing, yeah.
Yes. She likes
Yeah.
she likes the crooners.
Loves Rat Pack, Sam Cooke, Harry Belafonte, anything like that. That's the jam, right? I would say Harry Belafonte is maybe one of the
Belafonte.
Belafonte. Yeah, he's probably one
Belafonte.
of the lesser. So I think he deserved his due, and you could argue that it's been too late. But at the same time, I mean, how many of those people are you going to put in year over year? And so I think if you had to prioritize people in that genre, he would fall a little bit later, because there's really not a ton of songs. I mean, he did Jump the Line and Day-O are probably his two biggest hits. And I mean, if you
Day-O.
look at, yeah. I mean, even if you look at like iTunes and that kind of thing, those two songs are on it 15 times in a row from different
Oh, yeah.
albums being purchased. So I think he had a lot of influence, but I don't think he had the influence of a lot of the people in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could argue he shouldn't even be in because he's not necessarily, when people think of that era and that genre, almost no one would credit him, right? Would you ever think to say this era, Harry Belafonte? Probably
No,
not.
probably not.
Unfortunately for someone who's very good and had a very great career from that time. But I just see him more as somebody who was incredibly good at the genre that was popular at the time. But from a test of time standpoint, I don't necessarily know if he stands that.
Right.
Personally. I don't know. But should he be in? Maybe. But I don't. You could go either way. Because like I was saying with the Eurythmics, was he one of the best at his time? Maybe. But again, when we're thinking about, hey, let's rank people who did that, I don't even know if you were just like, oh, I'm going to do it off the top of my head. Would he make the cut?
I think, I mean, musically, I would say it's hard, but I think one of the biggest things that helps him out was his impact culturally. So I think in terms of his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, probably relies heavily on that as well. He was a supporter of MLK, very close friends. He helped organize We Are the World. He helped organize that initially, and he's been a UNICEF ambassador since 1987, and that's according to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Right.
And so,
yeah, I mean, just reading this bio, it sort of makes a little bit more sense because
he's 95.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I think you should be in. If you're asking me yes or no, I guess I'll go soft yes. But at the same time,
Soft.
I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean? What kind of show would this
Yeah.
be if we just agreed with everything? You know? But, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he's a shoo-in.
I don't. I could live without it, personally. But,
Yeah.
you know, good,
Right.
maybe not great. But did, like you said, longevity of career does matter, and I think he's had that, yes, and impact for sure.
Right. Next up on our list, we've got the one and only Elizabeth Cotten, and that's Cotten. This lady was a guitarist, an African American guitarist who influenced heavily some of the most iconic artists in rock and roll history: Bob Dylan, Grateful Dead, Peter, Paul, and Mary. I mean, the list goes on and on. She's widely known for her guitar picking technique, which is later often known as cotton style or cotton picking. She was very keen in learning instruments, and she even taught herself how to play it upside down. So that tells you how much drive this woman had. According to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, she recorded and performed until the age of 92, and she even received a Grammy at the age of 90. So, in terms of contribution to music in general, she has rightfully taken her place and staked her claim in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, so at first when I saw her and I listened to a couple of her songs, I sort of had the same feeling that I had about some of the things where I was like, all right, fine, you know? I'm not going to say her music itself, like, really floored me in terms of what's been done and has done. But then when I read about her, it was like, oh, okay, this makes much more sense. Because you're right, she did sort of invent a style of play that was mimicked and obviously not attributed to her because she was a black woman in the 30s. She wrote Freight Train, which is her biggest hit, which I didn't know about until today, but it is a good song, when she was 9.
I didn't know that.
So, no, 12. Sorry, 12. Whatever, still 12, right?
Either way.
Her biggest hit that lasted for 80 years, she wrote when she was 12 years old. So she had a hit that was an 80-year-old hit that still matters, and like you said, was nominated for a Grammy when she was 90, and she was relevant when she was basically 10. So invented a style of play, was writing music when she was basically a baby, and relevant in music until she was dead.
Yep.
Even though, like I said, I'm not necessarily sure I'm like falling out of my chair for her music, that is impressive and is a cornerstone into what rock and roll is, and so absolutely should be in for sure.
Yep, absolutely. Shoe in for her influence over the years. And my God, would you consider her a prodigy, virtuoso?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. When I started reading more about her, I was like, yeah. Yes. Okay. I get this now, right? So let's pump the brakes, Zach. You don't have to have terrible opinions all the time.
Sir, I highly value your opinion, so.
You might have missed one. I think you missed one, though. Judas Priest. Were you about to talk about them?
No, I was getting ready.
Okay. They were on my list before the other two.
Judas.
So I always say, well, maybe you missed those guys. All right.
We flip-flop. Well, go ahead. Talk about your boys,
well,
Judas Priest.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I'll just introduce a band that I listened to all the time in high school. So Judas Priest, one of the premier hair metal type bands, had a ton of those just hard hitting, sort of cross grungy, cross hair metally, but also true thrash metal at the same time, right? So they weren't making they weren't making they were sort of doing what Guns N' Roses did in the 90s in the 70s and 80s. But had that sort of like,
that's a good comparison.
leather thing that's really big in certain communities, and they have a lot of hits. They are very niche. I like Judas Priest, but I think they're a market. Do you know what I'm saying? They're not necessarily a band that I think a lot of people are going to listen to and love. It takes you seeking and desiring that sound. Now, I mean, it's tough for me because I just like bump my head to Hell Bent for Leather anytime it comes on, and they do have like really cool weird hits like Green Manalishi.
Yeah.
So again, it's a total yes for me to be in. I think they absolutely should be because they solidified something that is really, really cool. And the fact that he really sort of became the first true openly gay artist in that genre ended up being something that was not talked about in a very manly, robust type music.
Right.
For him to be out like that is very interesting to that genre and to come out as early as he did, right? They were still very popular. And so, yeah, I think that they definitely deserve to be in. And they still have a lot of influence within today, right? I mean, I would say I'm not a big fan of someone like Twisted Sister, but Judas Priest is what I think some people think that band is. A band with a ton of really solid, like British steel hits
Right.
that sort of predate Guns N' Roses. And Guns N' Roses, I think, did what Judas Priest does better, but they paved the way for sort of that. It's not necessarily what Metallica and Slayer and Megadeth is, where they're making that thrash sound. They sort of popularized it. And that's sort of what Guns N' Roses did, right? So they took that thrash style, but they gave it that pop sound. They took the Twisted Sister and the Poisons and the White Snakes of this world, and they gave the music meaning and just like a real crunch. And Judas Priest was doing that before. To a lesser degree, I believe, but I dig it.
I like that. I like it. I like that take. All right. We got a few left on this list. Just to kind of cover up. I wanted to speak on this lady. Sylvia Robinson, thank you for giving us one of the most iconic hip-hop groups of all time, Sugar Hill Gang. You going out on a limb and starting this group, not only did you you started something, you must have been one of them starting something because you did. But yeah, I mean, basically, thank you for creating a group that transcended hip hop in general. I mean, I've been to country concerts where people will break off and the bass player will start the bass line of, Apache or, the Rapper's Delight. And it just keeps going and going and going. I can throw it on at a wedding. Everybody knows the lyrics dang near. Yeah, it's 6 minutes and 38 seconds long, but they still know the lyrics. But yes, I think as a producer and her influence into the early stages of hip-hop, it's 100% okay for her to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I think at this time today, I think it's due. So congrats from me to you, Miss Robinson. Sylvia Robinson, thank you for creating one of my favorite groups of all time.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about producers and people who have influence on music, I mean, rap probably exists, but in what capacity if Sugar Hill Gang doesn't assemble and have a hit, right?
Right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's real hard. It's real hard. It is. So we've got a few here kind of wrapped up, and these guys are producers or managers basically. Me personally, I think that adding this guy Jimmy Iovine to the list, I think it's how you pronounce his last name, but it starts with an I. I think he's been through it. He's worked with Tom Petty, Bruce Springsteen, Stevie Nicks, U2, but then he's also dived in with Lady Gaga, Tupac, 50, Nine Inch Nails. This guy's got a wide freaking variety.
Right.
And he helped co-produce the 8 Mile soundtrack. So I think in terms of producers, this guy definitely belongs within this list. I mean, heck, he even worked with Dire Straits. In 1980, Bruce Springsteen's, like I said, Born to Run, 1975.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this guy has just... I mean, not to mention, he actually co-founded Beats with Dr. Dre because they've been longtime friends. So,
right.
I mean,
That's what I was going to say again. If you look on if you look on the legacies portion of this guy, it says his legacy is Dr. Dre, Sean Combs, and Trent Reznor. I mean, yeah. If your legacy is West East Coast hip hop and 9 Inch Nails, I think you're pretty good at your job, right?
That's what I'm saying. I mean, this guy. I mean, he literally. It almost looks like he influenced every aspect of music because you got.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the
Stevie Nicks.
If you sample a snare in your music at all, I guess you. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but I mean, phew. Okay, I don't like this though. Turning their this is quote unquote Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, turning their high performance headphones into a must have. Man, Beats are all right. I think they sound decent for people that are bass heads. I know when I was in high school, they sounded really nice, but we didn't have as high a fidelity.
Did he help create the Beats?
Yeah, he was a co-founder.
Okay. But, I mean, all right, so think about it. Regardless of what you think about the quality of the headset,
they changed the game.
Nobody was wearing those anymore.
No.
Nobody wore, like, over-the-ear, I mean, the brand was massive, and it brought everything to the forefront, and then it was like, what's better, Beats or Skull Candy? Skull Candy's cheaper. You know what I mean? There was
Skull Candy's for the win.
Exactly, right? So, but that's what I'm saying is you got arguments over what headphones you were wearing back at a time when that it didn't even matter, So,
right.
Regardless of the quality of whatever it is, I mean, that's such a huge industry-turning brand. You know what I mean? So, fact of the matter is, he's a fantastic producer, but he's also clearly really good at branding and keeping the forefront. I mean, it's, Bose isn't tied to a musician, but Beats is,
Yeah, I mean, I think the success of Beats definitely had a lot to do with Dre being associated. Just from him, like, oh, if Dre's endorsing this, he's a Grammy producer, people are gonna get it, and it worked. But also at the same time, they, like you said, over-ear headphones were considered what? Like what?
Yeah, we didn't care. Yeah,
we didn't care. Yeah, and it's like no, but then you get these on, it's like especially when I think it's when Beats went wireless that changed the game.
Oh yeah,
for over-ear headphones.
Everybody
I think that's what did
him.
it. Everybody had them. Fold up, put them in your locker.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody had Beats.
If you went to go work out and you didn't have a set of Beats, like you were, oh man, there's that hippie kid that's probably listening to Simon and Garfunkel as he works out.
Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. I remember that now. Everybody was like,
everybody,
if you ain't got Beats, you ain't nothing. And like I was like, man, I need to have Beats. And I had the Beats Pros. I got those for a good deal. The in-ear wraparound ears and those, the drivers that they had in those for the low-end bass. Oh my God. But then again, Beats has got low-end boosted bass. Mostly just because I think they they really wanted to focus on headphones for hip-hop, honestly.
Right. However, when it comes to producers, I might like that guy, But then when it comes to the other side with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, I
Yes.
mean, these guys were working with Prince.
Yes.
And then when they were like, I can't work with Prince anymore, who should we work with? Oh, and they just singled out and said, this person over here looks pretty good, and went and got Janet Jackson. And then
What?
she became a megastar. Who would have thought? So we're talking about two guys who really changed the game in R&B, in soul, in sort of that style of rock and roll. Worked alongside Parliament and Funkadelic and even Chicago. So the list goes on of sort of that creating that funk style that ended up blending into other things that drove that section of pop music in a way that I'm not necessarily sure people know who they are, but then when you see what's on paper, you're like, oh, that's legit.
You know who it is.
Exactly. So
For those of you who are big fans of 808s, you're welcome.
yeah,
They're probably one of the biggest influencers and introducers of 808s when it came to early hip hop, but also putting it into R&B. For instance, the SOS band, perfect example of it. Funk, but we've got some funky 808s in there that just kind of you didn't think they would fit, but they did. So yeah,
I
Jimmy
mean, think
Jam.
about this. This is one of the funnier things I read when I was reading through these bios. Prince fired them for missing a gig because they were working with too many bands.
That's Prince though.
I mean,
He'll call you at 2:30 in the morning. And he's like, "Hey, I'm in the studio. You want to come down and track some vocals?"
yeah.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, I get it though. But I mean, because he's just like, I want to do stuff this and that. But I mean, my God, the selected discography is just phenomenal.
Right.
Michael and Janet's Scream. You Remind Me by Usher, which his 8701 album was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Control, Nasty from Janet. I mean, Miss You Much. I mean, he set Janet's career off.
That's what I'm saying. They basically founded her. I mean, if they didn't do anything else, you know?
I think they could have just got Janet started and that was it.
Pretty much.
I mean, yeah, it's nuts. But yeah, Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, both of you guys, thank you so much. And welcome to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. About time. And then
Well,
last
on the list, I have a question. Because I'm not necessarily saying that this person should not be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But should agents, we're talking about producers, and producers have a big influence on the way the music is made and how it's done. And there's a lot of artists that totally attribute to whether or not an album is good to who produced it. You know, you've got certain artists that are in kind of a funk for a couple years, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd die on the hill that is the Bob Rock era of Metallica basically destroyed what you think of Metallica, right? So,
right, yeah,
it can help or it can destroy or do whatever. So producers, but I mean, Alan Grubman, who is the founder of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, so you can say, well, he deserves to be in it because he founded the thing itself. But he's just an agent. He worked with these people. He helped them get deals. Yes, agents are important, but I mean, we don't induct agents into the Basketball Hall of Fame just because they were LeBron James' agent. I mean, I don't know. What I'm not saying this guy shouldn't be in.
Rob Pelinka's not going to go in the NBA Hall of Fame.
That's more or less what I'm saying. So this guy invented the Hall of Fame. So sure, his name is on it. Maybe he should be in, whatever. But is this paving the way for agents? I just don't know I don't know if you get to be in because you were an agent. It just doesn't work for me.
He did a good job by leading by example because he created ways that way record companies did not abuse artists. He made sure that they had a record label, but they still had creative control, which a lot of record companies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, number one, for instance, Epic, I think, is who Timberlake was whenever Future Sex Love Sound started. They didn't want to drop it. They said nobody would like it. But it's people like him that actually cared in terms of originality and creativity of music.
Right.
And I think it has to show with him being a founder of the Hall of Fame.
Right.
I think that has to deal with him getting inducted. Just his what seems to be a pure driven passion for music at its core.
Well, he also did, he helped scale MTV, Live Nation, and now iHeartMedia, which for a long time was the biggest, podcast pusher. So he's been in music and
you can find us there too.
Right, in television, music, and podcast. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah.
I think from an influence standpoint, I'm not. Yeah, again, I mean, I think this guy is certainly, but do you have to have that type of career to be an agent and get into a music Hall of Fame? Because just negotiating good contracts to me is just being good at your job. I don't know.
I think it like how WWE does. If there's like a agent wing, because they have the celebrity wing of the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
I mean, I would see that. I mean, and they may do that. I'm not for sure, but I mean, when you look back, I took a little bit of a look at his track record. I mean, I think you have a good chance in getting in, especially if you've made an impact and you've left a mark. And I think that shows with the success of who he's worked with. I mean, U2. I'm not for sure if he was the one who worked that deal with Apple. If he was, I'll take that off of your ticket for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
My
if he's
God.
If he's the one that worked the Apple deal, never mind.
Never revoked. But for real, I mean, it's weird. I never thought of it this way in terms of like producers and agents and writers until as of late, because I open up my eyes in terms of music just because I focus up and do a lot of post-production work. I've started looking behind the scenes, not just rehearsing a song and performing it now.
Right. Well, you got no argument for me that like producers and you know what I'm saying. That's what I mean. I totally am in on those. The ones that we mentioned before, the 3 producers that got in. I think they have a better argument than maybe some of the artists that even got in. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
I guess I was just thinking if we're gonna talk about him, and we've been saying, are they in? Is it too long? Whatever. I don't disagree that he should be in, so I wanted to sort of pose the question of, do we draw the line, or does it matter? I mean, it's a Hall of Fame, so does it matter? It's just anybody who's associated with music that makes an impact?
I mean, me personally, and reckon I don't know the qualifications that these guys have set on. I'm going to have to look in and see what they have.
I don't either. I didn't do that. So,
I mean, it's hard, dude, because there's so many freaking aspects of music, of the industry.
Right.
I mean, like you said, the behind the scenes work, the mixing engineers, the producers, the musicians that play the instruments, the writers, the collaborative writers, the whole team. I mean, there's just so much. But I ultimately think, for me, it comes down to what they put into it.
Right.
And if you can show me, if I was on the committee, if I can look back at your tenure and your history and your influences, and I can see a dramatic impact on music, then I am 100% going to consider you for that nomination, even if you're not a vocalist and if you're not a vocalist and you've never stepped on stage. If you've got a huge impact of a career, even if it's behind the scenes, I think it's about time that you came forth and let everybody sees what you've done and give you the credit you rightfully deserve. Don't know much about this guy, but from what I've seen and what I've read on him as of late, I agree.
Unless he got Raised by Wolves put on your iPod.
Unless he did that.
Then it's
There's
over.
some YouTube. It's over.
It's over.
There's some YouTube songs I can listen to in the gym, but that album was not it. It was not it. I
Oh.
was like, oh, YouTube's going to strike a deal with Apple. That's cool. This gets added. This is already bought and added to my Apple Music library. That's awesome. You didn't tell me that I can't delete the damn shit off my phone. Sorry for the language, but I'm just like,
Yeah.
come on.
I hear it. Yeah.
It's like, ugh. But yeah, after that rant,
Over,
that, ladies and gentlemen,
overall, I would say it's a good year because I don't think there's much controversy, if any at
Right.
all. Like I said, that entire list, I think there's one, in my opinion, there would be only one that I would say I don't think they should be in the Hall of Fame, but I'm also not going to be like, what? You know, I'm also not like, what? It's not a big what to me, but of the 14, there's only one. You could argue Harry Belafonte as well as maybe not, but probably so, you know? So I would
Yeah.
say if you're nominating and putting in that many people and there's only really one that's even arguable at all, that's a pretty good year.
100%. I mean, and when I saw the nominations, I saw the list, I was like, dang.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm friends.
was- yeah, good.
It was good. I mean, when you look back, even the producers. I mean, yeah.
And even with that list, I think there's only two on there that I think it was sort of, wait, really? You know, with
Yeah.
Carly Simon and Pat Benatar, I just think are too late. Everyone else, it seemed okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, again, Cotton and Belafonte, they've a long career, but it's understandably taken this long, I guess.
Right.
Because it's, you know, again, it's kind of like putting in a great kicker. So they deserve
Pretty
to
much.
be in, but we get why it took this long.
Yeah, exactly.
So it fell over, but my recommendation for this week was actually a band that I don't love, but they have one album that I think is absolutely just fantastic, and that is the Decemberists. It's the Crane Wife. It is a concept album that's basically a lullaby, which I think it's the music is not like a lullaby, but the lyrics are written to be as such. It's sort of a folklore type thing within the music that they do. So even though they're kind of a weird sort of gimmicky alternate band that doesn't have a ton of great music, that one singular album, The Crane Wife, I think is absolutely fantastic. So if you've never listened to it, I would check that out.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that is listed in the video description and also on the podcast site that you were listening to us on. And for me, just because I've been on a kick with these guys lately, if you haven't listened to this album, I would definitely recommend you do. Take a second, listen to one of my favorite groups, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Give Californication a listen to. That is definitely one of my favorite albums that is a crossover of a feel of genres, but also really an album that specifies who a group is. It really cemented, you know, the Peppers are this kind of funk, punk, rock, hip group, and really put it on the one and really gave us some good songs, Californication, and the list goes on and on. So check it out, Californication. And what's your album again?
Oh, The Crane Wife by the Decemberists.
The Crane Wife by the Decemberists.
But you went easy with Californication, which is,
I know.
if not their best album, their second best album.
I need to dig into the B-sides a little
No,
bit.
it's good. You got to be reminded. If you don't, you know, if you're listening to this, you've never done the Chili Peppers, that's probably the best album to start with anyway. So,
Right?
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Scales of Music podcast. Thanks for joining us in terms of, well, this time talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Somebody sent me a text message the other day asking me about Bruno, and I just said no. So, yeah.
We don't talk about it.
We don't talk about it. Anyways, that is the Scales of Music podcast. I'm Michael. For Zach. Peace.
Peace.